Hello everyone and welcome into the final show of the week here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I am Christopher Shepard, your host. Thank you all yet again for tuning in. And for our final show of the week, we have a good one. We're continuing this narrative of finding the top player from each position. As you all know, I love doing my rankings each week, but I want to kind of limit it to one player before you set your lineups. So, as always, going to start off this Friday's show with my favorite starts and sits of the week as well. But I'm also going to continue to update you on the NFL and college football games with the hugest fantasy implications for this weekend. There's a lot of good games in college and a lot of good games in the NFL. And then, to conclude, as always, I'll give you a little bit of fantasy advice, specifically in the start-sit department for Sunday Night Football. A couple things have changed around, much like what happened last week when all of the hubbub surrounding that game led me to kind of change my tune on the cuff here. Same thing for this game as well. A lot of different things going on there. But before we get into any of that good stuff, I do want to remind you that if you want to see more exclusive short content or just more podcasts in general, consider liking, following, and subscribing to the show and the network as a whole. It is greatly appreciated by all concerned in the network. However, if you want to interact with the show more directly through our live streams, make yourselves available to the Super Chats, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. You can do one of two things to contribute throughout the show. You can click the $sign in the comments section, leave a tip or donation, or you can just leave a burning question, comment, or concern that I will be able to see in my chat box right here that I'll be able to read aloud. It is greatly appreciated yet again in any capacity in which you choose to contribute to the show. It just makes it that much better. Without further ado, let's jump into our first segment of the day concerning my favorite starts of the week. So as always, same kind of story here. Like I said, throughout the weeks, I'm going to be ranking certain players at different positions. And on Fridays, I'll be taking one player from each of those position groups and naming them as either my favorite start or favorite sit. Actually, it only works with the favorite starts because this is the first time you're hearing about the guys who I definitely think you should bench. But for the favorite starts of the week, all guys whose names you've heard before on my shows leading up to this week 9. But without further ado, let's tell you what ones are the best ones for you. Starting off with the QB position. This one is pretty easy. Matchups-oriented kind of guy. Not someone who I feel is going to get caught up in the quote-unquote trap game nature that the Jags will present. Jalen Hurts. And yes, that whole trap game narrative is something that should stick in the back of your mind. The Jags are still a tough out no matter who they play. They kind of grind you into their game and take advantage where they may. But it's proven that Jalen Hurts, no matter how erratic he seems at times, is someone who can't lead this Eagles team to wins against opponents such as the Jags. If you can take care of the football, be efficient, like we've seen in these past couple of weeks, then he's more than capable of leading the charge for the Eagles. We've seen it against the Bengals, and we'll probably see it this week against the Jags, where this offense, when it's at its best, is very efficient, it's very scary, and it's very difficult to beat. And while the Jags should be able to stick around in this one, I don't think it's going to be for long, and I think Jalen Hurts will be the reason. And it's not just because of his arm, it's because of his legs as well. Sustaining drives with his ability to be that dual threat player that they need, and in the red zone as well, being able to add that physicality to his kind of dual threat abilities in that area of the field will certainly take its toll upon this Jags defense that already is kind of in a position where they're not in an advantageous scenario whenever they step on the field. They know that their backs are up against the wall. They know that they're going to be the worst unit on the field when they face opposing offenses. So when you see someone like Jalen Hurts, it just makes it that much more difficult. And I think this will be the game that Jalen Hurts proves that he is finally someone who can get over the hump in terms of turnovers and truly take control of football games he's supposed to. So that's why I think Jalen Hurts is my favorite start of the week out of all the QBs that I talked about previously. But then, the second position, the running back position. How about a guy who we're going to be talking about a bit later in this show, playing on Sunday night, another primetime game for his team, Aaron Jones and the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Again, yet another matchups-oriented one. This one is just because the Colts' run defense has been appallingly bad this season, and I see no way in that Aaron Jones can't have a big game, because he is someone who has really changed the tenor of this Vikings offense. I feel like without a guy like Aaron Jones, this Vikings offense, at least at the start of the season, is entirely one-dimensional. And the reason why I say that at the start of the season was because his role was more important. And, tonight's game could see the return of TJ Hawkinson, which adds a little bit more variety to this Vikings offense. But I still think this pick holds merit here, because going forward, Sam Darnold's not going to look as comfortable as he has at the start of the season. He's already not looked comfortable these past two games in certain moments. So Aaron Jones is going to have to be someone to carry a little bit of the load a little bit more often than we've seen this start of the season. And it's going to be difficult because, as we all know, the Vikings are very capable of throwing the football. But it's going to take a little bit more from each and every one of these offensive skill position players to really make me think the Vikings, if they get to the playoffs, can make some noise there. And so Aaron Jones is going to be an X factor for the rest of the season. Look for him to continue to have solid games against weak run defenses and continue to prove why he is someone the Vikings can rely upon when the odds are stacked against them and when things might get a little bit rough in the goings. At the wide receiver position, this is a little bit of an interesting one, a little bit off kilter considering his struggles this year, but I think in this matchup against the Bills, I'm kind of contradicting myself on because I picked the Bills, I believe, some of the defenses that I think should be a viable start this weekend. But I think Tyreek Hill is someone who can, get that Dolphins offense going. And I feel like, yes, the Bills are perhaps the most willing defense against the Dolphins to just sit back and let Tua make the mistakes for them. But in this game, there are going to be instances where Tyreek Hill can take advantage of the thinness at the linebacker position, combined with, how often they try and disguise coverages to create big explosive plays on the field. And let's not forget, Tyreek Hill is not just a deep ball threat. He is someone who's a savvy route runner and can get open in areas where he may not seemingly have an opportunity to. He's always someone who can extend a play, can help his QB out, and not just be concerned about getting that one big moment that the Dolphins seem to have in every one of their games. So I feel like, yes, it's going to be another challenge because all the momentum with the Bills, it seems that they've already got this division locked up. But the Dolphins have a sense of rejuvenation now. Yes, they lost their first game with Tua back against a very weak Arizona Cardinals team. But not for nothing, I still feel like they have merit in these kinds of games where, you can find the moments where Tyreek Hill can be explosive and electric down the field. You can find the moments as well where he's going to have to be patient. So look for him to kind of wear down this Bills defense in certain moments when you never know what to expect. So that's why I feel like, even though this is a risky pick, it's one that I can't ignore when I think about how the Dolphins could game plan for this one. Then at the tight end position, this is a guy who's recently rounded into form, been getting a lot more opportunities, with injuries in his team, Cade Otton. And I like this matchup a lot for him against the Chiefs because I feel like while the strength of the Buccaneers offense right now definitely lies in its running backs, I feel like you have to challenge the Chiefs with physicality in their front because we all know they can stop the run. They have a lot of physical, strong, powerful players on their defensive front, which you have to account for. Or if you can account for them, you have to find ways to get the ball out quickly if you're Baker Mayfield. And Cade Otton is someone who I feel like can exploit some of the things that the Chiefs can do. Because if they load the box, they want to limit, Baker's time in the pocket, because that's what makes Baker Mayfield so special. That if he gets enough time in the pocket, he can pick you apart. But if he has to operate out of structure, he also can make plays happen down the field. So if that's their game plan, to try and frustrate Baker Mayfield, keep him within the pocket, then you're going to have to get the ball out very quickly. And Cade Otton is someone who I feel like can be physical enough to exploit the soft spots in coverage or extend the field a little bit in seam route situations. So look for him to be active in this matchup. And I feel like while the Bucs might not be able to win it outright, they're going to definitely keep it closer than a lot of people expect. The Chiefs aren't necessarily a quote-unquote world beater in their unbeaten start. There are moments where they've shown their vulnerabilities. Maybe not so much on defense, but Cade Otton is someone who is a very special player at the tight end position because of what he can bring in the receiving game in many different aspects. So that's why I think he's my tight end one this week in fantasy. And the defense and special teams to close out the show. The close of the segment, rather. Another matchups oriented one with the Commanders defense taking on the Giants. I feel like this Commanders defense is finally rounding into form. It's one that, hasn't necessarily had the challenge outside of the Ravens of facing a offense that's versatile enough to really confuse them. But they have shown the ability to limit damage, to take opportunity of certain areas of the field, and ultimately generate takeaways. And against the Giants, like I said a couple shows ago, you can find different moments to kind of take advantage of the Giants' sloppiness in certain areas, especially in the red zone. What we saw against the Steelers is indicative of what the Giants can be when, they implode. And I think it's the biggest part of why any defense going up against the Giants' offense has hope and has merit. No matter how bad they are, how mediocre they've been to start the season. This Commanders defense is one that I feel like is in a perfect time to take advantage of the wins they need to further cement themselves as the team to beat in the NFC East. And they're not going to slip up against the Giants. So that's why I feel like this matchup works out perfectly for them, and they should be a defense you should definitely consider starting for your fantasy squad this weekend. Let me know what you think in the comments about this segment. Coming up next, though, we have to transition from the starts to the sits. Which players do I think could sit on the sidelines this weekend for you in fantasy and might have to wait for their turn in your team? We'll be right back to talk about that right after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please